Next up is the Affordable Housing Plan discussion. We have several members of the committee here.
And many more at home, watching
Oh, good.
the screen.
Good.
Kevin unfortunately has COVID.
Oh.
Speaking of, I
I
saw
saw it
cold
somewhere.
spots,
Yes, it's.
I know, this
It's
either
very
freeze or
erratic.
gets stuffy.
and I have a radiator. And I'm kicking myself because I just put in new oil furnace.
Oh, no.
That was a great presentation.
It was.
It was pretty
It
awesome.
was really awesome.
As usual.
I.
You know, Rick Campbell was a member of
Yes.
the committee, and Cheryl Nath was the secretary.
Cheryl, thanks for being here.
And I'm Dave Goldenberg, it's a pleasure to meet you. So, just to bring us up to date, we have now had public input at the beginning of this process in November. We have had a presentation to planning and zoning, and we had their feedback. We have had 2 public information meetings. We've had a public hearing where there was a presentation. So the only thing now that's standing in the way of us completing the plan is to catch the feedback from the Board of Selectmen. And our intention at this point is to get your feedback, combine it with all the other feedback that we've had, and then go back and edit the draft and then bring it back for further comment or ideally approval. Yes,
Yeah.
Simple.
couldn't be simpler.
Dave, I have not had a chance to, we just got the West Cobb toolkit
It was just got approved on the 31st. Yes.
and.
I read through it and
Okay, I have not though,
Mhm.
and so,
That's this.
in terms of giving you feedback.
But it's not his plan, it's not our plan.
No.
No,
No.
but I can't give feedback.
I don't have a printed version,
Um,
that's.
I mean, I can give feedback to some extent on this plan, but as to whether we should be
But
looking.
as I said earlier, Westcog wants all of us chief elected officials to clarify that it is not a plan.
Right, it's a
As
toolkit.
it says, it's a toolkit
Right.
to go along with your plan. Now, state statute is very simple in terms of what they ask for. It could be a 1-pager, it could be 600 pages. They don't specify the information that they need or would like, just that, what are your plans and for the next 5 years to increase the number of units, right, under 8-30G. It doesn't give us a target at all. That's established by, well, 830J is what requires the
Plan.
plan. 830G is the affordable housing statute itself with the 10%.
Can I ask you a question? We had gotten from your office this, a Westcott plan that was sent to us electronically, which
That was the first one, yeah.
okay, which I have read through, and that
And
was
there
the
were
one.
changes made.
Okay, were there substantial changes made to that, or?
It was based on feedback. I don't have them off the top of my head.
Okay,
I don't believe they're, some substantive changes.
okay.
There were-
Only because the one that I
There
read
were-
online, I liked the Westcott plan. I thought that
It's
it
a
was.
toolkit.
It's a
Or the
toolkit.
toolkit, I liked the toolkit, I liked the way it was presented, I liked the numbers, the way they, the graphs that they used, I thought it was very straightforward, I thought it was a good metric. I liked it, I did, and I have heard feedback from some of the public hearings that I've attended or watched streaming if I missed them in person, and that there were many residents that asked us to look at the Westcott plan. So I think that they're a toolkit. So I think that the toolkit, the Westcott toolkit could be a good model or basis or, well.
It's not a model.
Well, all right,
It's a resource, and we used
It
it.
is.
Which we used. Dave actually distributed it to the entire committee as we were working together on the plans, so we all reviewed it. But I was also gonna ask, the annexed plans, and Rudy, obviously, you know this better, but first of all, the towns that chose to annex plans tend to be very small towns, like Reading, what was the other, Sherman, New Milford, I'm trying to think of some of
There were 8
the, New
communities.
Canaan is one, what was that, I have a list, Bridgewater, what?
8 communities out of the 18.
Right, 8 out of 18, so it's a small number, they tend to be smaller ones, towns, but if
Wilton.
you look,
Wilton.
Wilton has one too. If you look like at the New Canaan plan, first of all, you're still writing a plan, it's just that Westcog works with you to do the plan. But we all use the toolkit, and if you look at New Canaan's plan, it's very similar to ours. It talks about many of the things, it talks about inclusionary housing, zoning, it talks about a goal of 1,500 units or something, it talks about many workforce housing. So it is a town, these are all
But the
town-specific
plan should be
plans.
specific to what we feel we can achieve in the next 5 years. Am I
Correct.
correct with that?
Right,
And you're not gonna achieve 1,500 units.
no,
in
and
the
they're
next
not
5
either,
years.
but they
Right.
mention that number just like we do, in the sense that theoretically, people talk about 1,000, but their plan, like ours, calls for a very modest number. But the point I was making is the New Canaan annexed plan, and I didn't look at them all, I looked at Wilton's and I looked at New Canaan's very carefully. But the New Canaan's annexed plan, because you're still writing your own plan, you
Right.
just have Westcog working with you.
Right.
So I think there's this misnomer,
The
you know,
misconception that
that
there's already a plan.
you're just
there.
taking this plan and using the toolkit and using it. But you still need to do your own plan, it's just towns that are either smaller and didn't have the resources, didn't have Dave and other people who put like hours and hours into this plan, I mean, we all did. But if you look at the New Canaan plan, and I know you can't do that for today, it actually has many of the same, it's very, very closely aligned, I would say, in terms of types of recommendations, maybe not as specific, but I know there's talk about taking out the specifics, but in terms of goals.
I appreciate it was a toolkit, I appreciate that you looked at it, the flavor of the toolkit when I read the toolkit versus the flavor of what I got when I read the proposed Ridgefield Affordable Housing Plan were two different flavors. It just
Right.
seemed, the toolkit seemed more, and it's a toolkit, so I know it was more general.
It was
more-
resources.
It was, yeah, it just seemed.
It was also regional, it was for the
Yeah.
entire
Right.
region, 18
Right.
towns, whereas this plan is specifically for and about Ridgefield.
As
Correct,
does-
and that would be part of the annex, had, if you.
We could just take this and make it an annex to
Mhm.
the Westpac plan, doesn't matter.
It's really the formatting that was different, that they have a similar format because they're working with Westcog. But it's still a town-specific plan that
Right.
goes into detail, so
But
I
I'd
just-
like to see, I'd like to read it and see what that format is compared to our format.
So when do you want us to come back?
I just,
Well, I have other things too, not
Yeah.
just that. That's fine if you want time to digest that, I don't have
I
an issue
would,
with that.
yeah, I mean, there are other.
As I said, I believe at the public hearing, I stated that I did write OPM
Right,
to ask
you
for an
did.
extension to July 8th. So I would like to try and work within that time frame. And believe it or not, that's not that far away. We're already June 1.
Well, the plan was, as of the public hearing, that we would have all of your feedback by tonight.
Right.
We would spend the next week or so really burning the midnight oil to draft a revision that you could vote on the 15th.
Yeah, that's right.
Because
Yeah, but I don't understand why we can't get, we've had this plan for a while, we've heard the feedback, when I've gone through, I've got a bunch of notes.
Yeah.
I'm sure we can all get feedback on the plan. I feel like,
I'd like to hear though, you've had a lot of feedback from your public
Yeah.
information. I was thinking, I thought we were gonna actually see an updated revision based on what you heard from the,
In other words, a draft of.
Well, draft,
well,
yeah.
we talked
yeah,
about
from the
that.
planning and zoning, from your public, what you heard and then what your revised proposal is.
Well, the most
I mean, I
important
think-
body is,
Well,
The
yeah,
First
but I'd
Selectmen.
like to incorporate a lot of the things that because I went to a lot of those meetings, I would like
Then
to
you
see
know.
a lot of those, I'm sorry?
then you know.
Well, I know, but I would like to know what you and your committee are incorporating in and what your recommendation is, because you are a committee of this board.
Right.
You're gonna make the recommendation of, of the plan
Sure.
that you would like to see us
Right.
approved. So I thought as we were going through this, that you would, unless you're telling us that, no, you're not gonna, you're not making any changes, that, let's say, P and Z had recommended. If that's, I don't know.
Well,
And that would be helpful, I think, for, well,
That you're
for
in fact gonna take those into
Well,
consideration.
we were not allowed to revise the plan before the hearing, because then we would have to
Right.
then we have to file a new plan and wait another 35 days for the new hearing. But more importantly, it doesn't make any sense to get people's feedback and then rewrite the plan and then get your feedback, and then rewrite the plan again, doesn't it make more sense to
No,
get?
Dave,
It's not rewriting.
It doesn't have to be a rewrite of the plan, just a separate listing maybe, which is what we have from planning and zoning, what their recommendations are. I don't know what other recommendations you received that you pulled away from the public hearing. For example, using the WestCog toolkit and taking a look at this, but I also would like to go through this a little bit and offer some of my ideas and thoughts that when I read it, as Sean has.
Yeah,
Spent the
and-
time to do it, and I think that's what they want to hear. What are our thoughts about it?
To Bob's point, so before our public hearing last week, I had said the same thing, like, will we see a revised draft? The work that I do, that's how things are done, right? You work on something, you revise it, you keep kind of
and
revising.
keep revising.
You said it was, you're not able to do that, that's fine. And I had sent a note, an email, and you responded to. That was essentially, just what Bob was saying is, so you've heard a lot of this feedback, without drafting a new plan, what do you take from that? Or, I've heard a lot of that feedback, but how do you take that? Do you, B and Z had a lot of good suggestions. Do you say like, oh, we agree with some of this, we don't agree with some of this? So just, it'd be nice to hear sort of a summary of, from the committee, given all the feedback, what are you thinking about that? How do you think you might incorporate that? I don't know, I can go through and give, every single little comment that I have, but I think a lot of it are things that have been said before, so.
A lot of it is what P and Z said.
Oh, yeah, exactly, I'm very along with what they said. So are you able to do that, just, some kind of a summary of, like, what are your kind of key learnings as, have you incorporated
Well,
all these different learnings, yeah?
I can't speak for the committee at all, because we have not met to deliberate it
You've
yet,
not met,
because
okay.
we have not had all the feedback yet, and the hearing was just a week ago or so.
But just, if we took the P and Z, we went down to that, for example, what they write in the bottom of the front page. While, on the other hand, we believe recommendation for new construction of affordable housing on specific targeted sites may be premature and risky to the success for such a plan as this. Does this board feel we should pull away from the specificity
Yes.
and use more goal-oriented of a plan? In other words, for the last 5 years, we've averaged about 20 units of affordable per year. Would you agree with that?
No. We calculated using the historical numbers that in 5 years we would get 17 new
Right.
derestricted units.
I'm going back 5 years, and with Al looking at the different
Yeah.
projects that were approved under affordability, the number of units we got, and it comes down to
Here's
about
why that doesn't work though,
100
we had a 4-year moratorium, and during that 4-year moratorium, there was a lot of pent-up desire to build. As soon as that moratorium came off, they all lined up, boom, 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 we had 11 projects.
Mhm.
And for the past year or two, there's been very little, almost nothing. So there's really no good way to examine it. That's why we went all the way back and looked at the applications. And that's where we came up with that 17 number, which seems to us to be maybe,
About 17 per year.
No, total.
Yeah,
Over 5
17 over
years.
5 years.
that's
It's a
historical.
very low number.
It is, but the
Based
percentage,
on, and this was just a quick conversation with Al Garzi today, and they said over the last 5 years, what would you say were the number of projects and affordability that we generated in the community? And that's where he came up with approximately 20 per year of affordable units.
right, but the point is that those are not representative years.
Uh-huh.
And if you look at, and you average it out over the whole time, it works out to about, I don't remember exactly how many.
The whole time.
Yeah, what was the
being
whole time?
1990?
I
Going
mean,
back to-
1875, right?
No,
Going
affordable
back
housing
to
was
when-
1990.
Going back to when this was, when 8-30G was.
30 years ago.
Yeah, roughly 30 years ago. So what that told us was that, based on that historical record, we would arrive at about 17. I don't know, there's no one from planning from
Yeah.
the office here who can tell.
No, but the first project, I think, was in 96.
Right.
down at the junction 35 and 7 on the right, I forget what it's called. And there were
Village.
20-year restriction, 25-year restriction.
It's 25 year, and also Steve Zemo's beech tree, whatever, garden tree that is.
Right, right.
And those came off already.
That was before 95 Beach Street.
Yeah, I think so, yeah. I think that came off in 20, I don't know, it came off, I think.
But my point being, in that 10-year period, that first 10-year period, there was very little,
Right.
very, very little.
Because there wasn't a need for it.
I don't know,
No,
maybe the
well-
market was hot, so you could build, and there was land, and they were selling, et cetera. What I've seen in town over the years is that when the real estate market slows up and there's little demand, the development community will go to affordable housing to generate the cash flow to get the projects going and make it happen that way. But when the market's hot, you don't see a lot, like right now. We don't have any affordable applications coming in, and builders are building.
Because
in
everything's
town.
selling.
Everything
Right,
sells.
everything's selling.
A perfect example is over at Branchville Road with Bob's house,
Yeah.
you know, by Lincoln Lane. That sat for years and years and years. Now all of a sudden it's fast tracked, and I heard there's an offer on it already. So I think the market has a lot to do with it as well. But if we took the last 20 years, it would make a big difference, because I think the first 10 years, we didn't see much activity, and that's gonna bring that number way down.
Okay.
That's all.
Don't disagree with
I think we've done quite a bit of development. I'm not saying it's perfect, right? Some towns haven't done any, some towns have done a lot more than this. What's interesting in the Westcog report
Yeah.
is when you look at the communities and you see that the cities are the ones that are actually providing so much more affordable housing. Stanford alone,
Mhm.
I think there were 2,200 units in there. I forget what the time frame is. I handed you my report. It's in one of the charts, but it was incredible how the cities right here,
Well, they have an inclusionary zoning regulation. They're not
yeah,
subject to.
from 2002 to 2020, right, 18-year period, Stanford added 2,300 units.
Affordable or altogether?
Change in affordable housing units from
Wow, that's
'02. It is amazing. Danbury created 248, 653 in Norwalk. And that's what the Westcog plan was criticized for, because looking at it on a regional basis, when you take those units into consideration in the cities, it softens the demand, if you will, for affordability based on, look at all the units we have. And you can't cherry pick each community. I asked the question, did you run any numbers taking the cities out and what the surrounding towns have done? They haven't done that, they're gonna do that for me. But I found that astounding, the impact that it has, so that's why the regional report looked as though we were doing very well in terms of supplying affordable units. But 8-30G is about getting the affordability out of the cities and mixed into the,
Right.
mixed into the communities.
Right.
I don't know the point of what I'm
That's
talking
true.
about.
And I think the biggest change in the.
There's so many variables in here.
The biggest change in the toolkit was that recommendation to be able to buy credits from other cities' affordable housing developments is out. Because I did not see that in there.
Because that got a lot of criticism.
I got a lot of
It did.
criticism.
Yes.
It's not a
Yes,
good idea.
exactly.
Right, yeah, that was taken
But to
out.
Rudy's point, I do think that, and maybe this is, maybe, I know that you said it's more generic and regional, but it did, I felt that when I was looking at it, it was a more of a positive light on the number of units that Ridgefield was actually, that quantifying it were getting credit for, than what I felt when, because of, and now I understand, you were looking over a longer period of time. So obviously, if you look over a longer period of time, divide the same number, it's gonna be much less than what it was with this.
It's not exactly the
So-
same number, but.
Yeah.
But
Different
in that
metrics,
regard, I really, I felt that maybe this was a truer picture.
Which, this one,
the toolkit,
the toolkit, because it was from
because it's more recent.
2002 to 2020.
Well, our numbers are taken right from the 8-30G and affordable house right here in town, so
Right.
they would be getting their numbers from us. really.
Okay,
So-
Right, but they didn't look at the same time frame. Right,
they
that's
divided
all
it by
I'm
a
saying.
shorter span. But
When
to
you
get
take
back,
30 years versus 20 years, it looks much different
But
picture.
it's a different number.
Especially if the concentration was in the last 20 years.
but to get back to what Rudy had been saying about the specificity of the projects and the comment that planning and zoning did make about that, I agreed with that. I thought that the specificity in our plan was too specific.
And I know
Because
why.
I don't think,
But
I really, yeah, go
I
ahead.
know why they were doing it, because like at Ballard Green, the land that may look vacant was already used to justify 6 or 8 additional
Right.
units we did, remember, Bob?
Yeah, when they did the clubhouse and all, right.
Right. That was used for that, so it would need a variance and et cetera, so,
Or a friendly 8-30G.
well, we own it. It would be a friendly, like we did with the Meadows.
Right, it would need some sort of zoning
That was
approval.
that was a friendly
That was a friendly
8-30G.
8-30G.
Those were 20 units.
Right. But I have a question about specificity,
Sure.
okay? Are we supposed to not name it and just say we want to create more housing? Because that's not really a plan. What we say here, for example, is when it comes to Ballard
What page are
Green,
you on?
I'm sorry, this would be page 36. There's no number on that page, so you have to make that.
How we get there, strategies and tactics.
Yes. And we say, we recommend the town work with the Ridgefield Housing Authority to evaluate the site for future development and if suitable, support the RHA in that development. So what would you rather have us say? Just look at available town lands before they get?
No, I would say continue to work with the RHA. Yeah, that's a good point, but to say specifically it should be Ballard Green
Right.
is specificity to me.
I think if you look at the language from the P and Z letter,
Yes.
well, I don't think they said like, oh, it's wrong to be specific, they said they have trouble endorsing it, right? Well, any project may be proven feasible and achievable, P and Z, PZC must hesitate to endorse them specifically, given the limited information at the stage. So again, I don't think they were saying like, this is wrong to do. I think
They
from
were
their
saying-
perspective, it's tough to endorse it because there's all these other things going on.
Right.
But are we actually
Well-
They
asking them to
can't
endorse?
endorse it until it comes before them.
No, because
They
once
can't.
it's written down and it's part of
They're gonna vote on
the
it, right?
plan,
I
and
heard
we
you.
vote on
Yeah.
it, you know, then it becomes, it's codified. And then, you know, in a couple of years, somebody comes out with a plan and says, well, you told us that we were gonna look at Ballard Green, and, you know, the people that are sitting here go, well, no, that wasn't really what we said. We said, we wanted you to work with RHS, you know, the housing authority, but no, it's in this plan that we were gonna do it. And now it's almost a fait accompli.
Well,
And I think that is where I'm
It's
having
kind of-
trouble with.
Yeah, and I'm having the same problem, but I'm gonna go back to the original proposal you made on Prospect Ridge, and when you requested the feasibility study for it. I mean, I had a problem with that we were gonna, and I even asked you that day, I said, if you get the feasibility study comes back, that's gonna be an implied approval, and you said, well, yeah, I mean, if we're gonna go through this, yeah, and then everybody at this table said, no, well, no, we're not implying the approval. And again, I think, but with the specificity, the problem that I have is, it's like we're saying that the town has to vote on this. We have to have, you know, a town meeting and public hearing, and we're not even close to doing that. So I don't know that the town's gonna want affordable housing on Prospect. And we're already going to the point where, you know, you're putting it in there, and to Maureen's point, it's gonna be like somebody's gonna look at that and say, well, you put it in the plan, so you should
to
approve it.
evaluate it, not to, we didn't say we're gonna build it, we said not gonna build it unless it's suitable and feasible.
Well, you can evaluate different properties,
Right.
okay, but, I mean, quite frankly, I think you put that in there, and when that's, right now, I think a lot of people think it's gonna be used for a ball field or recreation or open space, you know, whatever. I just think it's very premature to start getting the community worked up about something like this when,
They're already worked out.
well,
So-
I just have a question about,
I don't think you're gonna get this.
I have a question about how do you say it?
Specificity.
Being specific.
It's a tough one, too.
If we didn't specify particular properties, like Prospect Ridge,
Right.
do you think that we should at least specify numbers? Like, we wanna have 125 somewhere.
As a goal.
Somewhere as a goal.
Right.
But then you gotta quantify that goal. I mean, is
Like,
there,
what makes
is
up
there,
that 125?
well, no, is there, I don't personally, this is my own personal feeling, I don't see that Ridgefield has a housing crisis for, subsidized housing. Okay, and, so I wanna see that quantified and proven that we need 125 or 50 subsidized units. Okay, now if we're talking about, you put in a plan that, where I think we have a need, and that's, we want to be able to bring young families in to fill up our schools again. Okay, and keep the, community, vibrant. We want to keep we have people that have given a lot, we see through all our committees and commissions, people that have given a lot to this town, but they want to sell their big houses and still live here, but they're not gonna qualify for subsidized housing. We need that kind of
I
housing.
think what I hear you saying is that the definition of affordable is not necessarily 8-30G.
Exactly,
right?
exactly,
That it runs through middle housing, middle income. or,
exactly.
I know where my daughter lives out in Denver, they're building a lot of that, middle income housing. It's not necessarily affordable.
Well, it's affordable, it's not subsidized.
Right. Well,
I mean, sometimes.
affordable under 8-30G.
Right. Or
Sometimes,
even underneath that, well, I guess in a sense,
It doesn't necessarily have to be subsidized.
Well, it's subsidized in the sense that if you put 30% of the units in there, and it's an apartment, the other, 20 people
Or market.
are market, they're subsidizing that for the 30% that, have a lower, market, or have a lower rent. So in a sense, it's subsidized, but it's not government subsidized.
Right, right.
Well, I agree with you. That's housing that we absolutely need. But we also need, on top of that, housing for people who are housing cost burdened. And our research was able to tell us just how expansive that need is. So I think even though we may not be able to say we need exactly 417 units, or whatever it might be, we can say this is the need that we need to address, and anything that we can do to move us towards that is going to be helpful. And that's why we took it and said, rather than say how much do we need, let's say, what can we actually produce to get towards meeting that need?
So that number is the 17 units in the next 5 years?
Well,
That's part of it, that's if you look through it,
Right,
it's
right.
additive.
if you look at,
that was sort of like the minimum,
yeah, we looked at, let me sorry, let me just find my page view.
33 or so.
No, it's right after that. Setting affordable housing goals. So that's page 30, yeah, I'm sorry, 33, right. Doesn't have numbers. I'm writing in my hand. So there were studies done by a number of organizations, including Westcott, or when it was HevGo. And they determined what they called a housing gap. And the housing gap is very large. It's so large that we're never gonna get there, at least not within any reasonable period of time. We looked at our own data, and we saw the need for hundreds and hundreds of units, so we're not gonna get there. So, okay, let's look at it this way. Let's say, what if we just did nothing? Right?
Right.
Based on the annual, well, it's 20 years, based on the annual rate of applications in the past 20 years, we would expect to see about 17 additional deed restricted units in the next 5 years. This would be insufficient to address our needs. So then we said, what if we made zoning and infrastructure changes? For example, allowed some trans-oriented development in Branchville, made some other zoning changes, including allowing middle housing, and everybody knows what that is, right?
Well, that was a lot of little pocket houses in smaller, it's almost like a PCD, planned residential
Well,
PRD.
In a way, it's related to that, but the idea is to create a transitional zone between the very dense center of town and the sparse outlying areas of town.
It just seemed very congested to me, a
What-
lot of
what are
those
you
the middle pocket communities that you were talking about. Just,
The TOD?
no, the
Oh,
middle,
middle housing,
the
okay.
middle,
Okay.
It seemed congested in what way?
that you were sandwiching a lot of little houses into a very small piece of property.
That's our downtown area, is what,
Right,
how
but
we
it's,
evolved.
exactly,
Well,
but it's getting very congested in a lot of, I mean, even just on New Street, you could see all the houses that were built on that one piece of property that, you know, that we had.
Oh,
to
yeah,
I mean, that's like
right at
amazing,
the top of it,
right?
You're talking about where they're putting 3 houses
Yeah.
on one lot?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, that's an example of what happens if we don't take control and do it our way.
But P&Z also approved a 3-acre zone, correct me if I'm wrong, Mr. Katz, on limestone on the right, where there were
Great Hill Road,
3-acre, yeah, right, at Great Hill.
Yeah, right, great, help.
3 acres that was broken down into 1-acre lots each, with
Right.
one of the houses affordable.
Affordable, right, those- But then again, that's what happens if we just say, okay, we do nothing, we'll let 8-30G take our course, and nobody likes that.
But what I'm getting at is that why, I was under the impression for many years that you needed a sewer line in Ridgefield to change density, to increase density, et cetera, under 8-30G, that it's a health concern. And that septic systems don't have an infinite life. In fact, about 25 years is the average. So like the building down on Route 35, which is on a septic system
Mhm.
with, I don't know how many units are in there, I forget. 15, 20, whatever it is. What happens when that system fails? And it's right adjacent to wetlands. Today, I don't know if it would ever get built because of the close proximity to the wetlands.
Right.
But things like that, do you look at a sewer line? I don't remember seeing it in here.
Well, in context of Branchville, we
Yes.
talked about that,
Yeah,
because
correct.
there's really limited septic capacity. I mean, you can have, I grew up in a house with a septic system, there were, 6, 8 houses to an acre, right? That's Long Island.
Hmm.
And there were no sewers there at the time.
No, but different soils. And
But-
some people feel that we should look at zoning from a soils perspective.
Of course, it's a
Right,
consideration. yeah.
that, for example, the Ridgebury area of the town is considered Ridgebury clay, right? It's very poor porosity.
Mhm.
It's very difficult to drain the waters through that, so a lot of your systems, you have to bring in a special fill, et cetera, et cetera. That wouldn't be where we would want high density, because the soils can't handle that,
Right.
right?
Oh, of course.
So would we look at this more from a soils perspective rather than how you're looking at it here?
Well, I think,
You're looking at it in town because of sewers, right? Most of the properties you look at
it
have sewers.
had
if not
sewers,
all.
and the sewers extend a little bit, I don't know, you probably know the exact boundaries. That's your business, right? So we want to maximize the opportunities in those areas without,
Yep.
and of course, anything that would change would have to be subject to health approval and,
Right.
anything like that.
Right, but to simplify my point, I think we need to take the environment into consideration when you're doing affordable housing or density. And you're looking at a change in density, or increase in density. Right?
Right. And of course, on any major project, that's sort of mandatory. We do an environmental review, and part of our study of Prospect Ridge property is going to be a further environmental study, once we move forward with that.
With this page though, I did think that, and I know that we had talked about it here, this was the setting affordable housing goals where it was the CHFA 2260, the number of units that were reflected here were an aspirational goal from the state, I thought, was what the conversation we had here, and that perhaps that wasn't quite the numbers that we wanted to see as the goal that we have in Ridgefield, because it just seemed like that they were more of what we were being thrust upon us from what the state was saying and not what we really actually needed in town.
What I'm hearing tonight, though, is setting the goal of 20 units in the next 5 years is minimal. That'll happen naturally, I think.
Along with, 7 market rate units for every 3 affordable units, which will put us further behind.
See, I don't think, I hate that argument. I don't think we should be solving for, I said this many times, for 830G to get a moratorium, because 4 years from now, if we got the moratorium today, we're gonna be right back there.
Yeah, but I wasn't referring to the
No,
moratorium at all.
No, I know, but,
Right.
David,
I was just saying that 17 affordable units as a goal over the next 5 years is a low target.
Sure.
It-
But I think
it's-
1,300 or 2,200 is a high target, it's ridiculous,
Well,
right?
Right.
I mean,
The recommendation is 17.
No, well, the recommendation.
I don't think it's a
is
recommendation.
very different. So we said, if we do nothing, we'll end up with about 17 additional
Right.
units based on historical records. If we make zoning and infrastructure changes, we could add another 20 to 25 units. But if we were proactive, right, and created perhaps 70 units on town-owned property, 8 units for people with disabilities, another 10 units coming through innovative programs like encouraging people to restrict ADUs. That way we could get reasonably 125 units over the course of 5 years.
and then what you're doing is you're creating additional, whatever your term is.
Infrastructure.
Huh?
Need for infrastructure?
Well, need for infrastructure, but no, you're creating more people that are going to be housing, what's the?
Challenged?
Housing challenge.
Alice.
Not
Well,
Alice, but no,
that's the goal.
because we're gonna, the cost,
Housing cost burden is the term, yeah.
what is it?
Housing cost burden.
Yeah, housing cost burden. We're gonna create more housing cost burden because we're gonna be increasing the cost of housing in this town, the cost of taxes, because, for example, let's just stay with Prospect Ridge here for a
Okay.
second. You want the property donated to you.
Right.
Okay, so otherwise, we could sell it to a developer for 70 units and get $3-4 million for it. Then but if we donate it to you, or to the,
Housing authority.
to the housing authority, that's a revenue we're gonna lose. Then it's gonna be a subsidized property, so we're not gonna get, the $400,000 or $500,000 a year taxes. We'll get a payment in lieu of taxes of $30,000. And then you're gonna want the sewer hookup, and that, what is it, $5,700 per unit? And you're gonna want the town to pay for, who's gonna pay for the sewer hookup for those 70 units?
Of the project, we have to pay
Oh,
for it.
well, again, but then who's gonna ultimately, what did you do at the Meadows?
There was a reduced connection charge.
It was a reduced
because it was
connection
affordable.
charge.
Yes.
And then we're gonna have to extend that sewer line, because it's, where,
Well, that would be the project.
again, but okay, that won't be a burden on the taxpayers, where everything else would be. We're gonna have a reduction of taxes, we're gonna have, because we're gonna have the payment in lieu of
Well,
taxes.
we won't have a reduction, we will not have achieved as much as we could.
Correct, and then we're gonna have additional expenses, with, we're gonna have kids in school at $22,000 a year to educate them.
That's not the way that works.
I'm sorry?
We don't get charged per student, that's the advertised cost.
Right, but I mean, we do get those, that is our cost per, per student, okay?
But each
So
new
these
student
are,
gets added
the
22,000.
taxpayers are paying for this. All I'm saying is that these projects are very, very expensive. And we have to take a look at it. I'm not saying we're not doing them, but we have to look at the actual cost of it. And we're so far from that point, that's why I'm gonna go back to the argument here that we should not have any specificity, if that's the right word now, for these projects until we do those types of analysis.
But I think the state needs us to set some goals, and
and we set the
I-
goals based on need, and we don't, I.
Well, the state doesn't look at that though. With 8-30G, it's not, their need is based on what they see statewide.
Supposed to be our plan.
And 8-30G passed, because the city supported it, basically in '89.
Right, right,
Right?
yeah.
And we all ended up having to share in the burden of affordable housing, if you want to call it a burden, or the supply of affordable housing.
Mhm.
That's the 10% goal, which,
We'll never get to it. We'll never get to it.
not in our lifetime, that's for darn sure.
I don't think the town would ever want that. I mean, that changes the character,
Oh,
not
yeah.
the character, but I mean, we become a city when that happens. You have that type of development, high-rise development, high-density development.
That would mean about 1,000 units right now,
Yeah.
about 10,000.
And, you know, what I heard at these meetings, the people of Ridgefield do not want that.
The people who attended do not want that. We did a survey,
But that was a small sample. That wasn't, that was not,
900 people,
how many?
900 households.
I thought, I didn't think that was a large amount.
It's 10%.
Okay.
We've got
Another point
10%.
was there's a lot more than
10% of the households.
the attendance at the meeting.
Correct, that's true.
And, you know, we didn't say to them, should we have affordable housing? That's not a question we're even learning anything. What we did was we looked at the comments. We had some, 200 comments, and we did a sentiment analysis of them. Where did they stand on affordable housing? And there were actually more people in favor of adding affordable housing than were against adding affordable housing. And there were also a number of neutrals. That's
But
also.
let's be honest, okay, because when you say, I know you are, but let's be a little more detailed, let me put it that way. Okay. When you say affordable housing, and we can go around this room and everybody here will give you a different idea on what affordable housing is. What you're talking about though, and I don't think it was specified in that survey, you were talking about affordable housing. Yeah, we all want affordable housing, okay? But do we want, do we want subsidized, 1,100, 2,000 units, or 1,000 units of subsidized housing?
Well, we're not asking for 2,000 units or
1,000, whatever.
We're not asking for
you're-
1,000. We're talking about 125 units over 5 years. That's what.
Which, by the way, one of my pieces of feedback, and this is what I shared earlier on, all those numbers that say, these thousands, the 1,600, I think it's a tremendous distraction. You're talking about this being our plan, I'd say strike all of that. That's not our plan, that's somebody else's
Right.
plan.
Right.
That creates lots of distraction and, you get people running around and saying, oh, there's a proposal for 1,000+ units,
Right.
which is not anywhere near the case. I think that would help things quite a bit.
Well,
Yeah,
just
and
note
if you're
that,
looking for 125 units over the next 5 years, and again, as I discussed with Al, he's saying we've averaged about 20 units a year over the last 5 years.
that would be,
That's his count. Over the,
100
just not taking the last 30 years or 20 years, the last 5
we
years.
don't even have 100 units. We don't even have, do you know that we don't even have 100 8-30G affordable units? There might be 100 units altogether in buildings that included 8-30G. That would make more sense. But 100 8-.
No, we don't, I think you're right, Dave, I don't think we have 108-30G units, but if we're talking about affordable housing isn't just 8-30G.
I've been saying that for 10 years, yes. Exactly. It's also, the 8-30G talks about 80% and 60%, but there are a lot of people at
Yeah.
50% and 30% who are.
Well, we're not
struggling
gonna
right now.
change that formula.
Oh, no, we're not changing that formula, but.
We
if we're-
can't, the state would never, we never get it through.
Right, but the need is at all levels. The state needs several 100,000 units. We have a housing crisis in the state, right? All we're saying is Ridgefield can add 125 units in the next 5 years. And we demonstrated that there's enough need in Ridgefield. We're not talking about importing people from God knows where. We're talking about addressing the needs of people who call me every week. The phone rings in Tony Phillips' office every day. And the stories are heartbreaking. I was talking to a woman the other day. Her rent went up $200 a month for her deed restricted affordable unit. She can't afford that. And she's trying to figure out what she's gonna do.
$200 for a deed restricted affordable.
It went up 200, yeah, because it's based on median income. Median income went up. I heard from, when I mentioned this at the meeting, and I had to retract it because it wasn't attributed, but, you know, people with need in Ridgefield don't wanna come forward. No one wants to be the
No,
face
that's true.
of need. But this is a woman who was explaining how she hides from her children the fact that she's skipping meals so they can eat because they have to pay their rent. These are rich children, these are people who know, and, you know, it just doesn't seem unreasonable to the Affordable Housing Committee to say, we believe we can build 125 units over the next 5 years to take steps towards meeting a much greater need than
And
that.
you know what, I don't have a problem with your saying that, but I have a problem with your specifying where.
All right, I heard that. You know, we hear that from you, we heard that from P and Z. What to you, for example, we already are doing a study of Prospect Ridge.
I mean, have you looked at, like, the idea of readapting buildings that we already have?
Absolutely, that's on our list of recommendations. It's called
Adaptive
adaptive
reuse.
reuse.
Yeah.
Thank you. It's
And
called.
P and Z wanted to emphasize that, right?
Yes.
So maybe
How-
it's an issue of prioritizing.
Yeah, that was one of the things that they
This is where,
said.
right, which was P and Z, right?
How many buildings in Ridgefield right now are suitable for adaptive reuse?
At least one school.
At least one school?
Well, no, I mean, I'm just saying, if we could close a school, we could have an adaptive reuse.
Absolutely.
Firehouse and a PlayStation coming up?
Yeah,
Yeah.
That's, yeah.
We're absolutely in favor of that. But remember, you know, when you're turning the firehouse into 10 units or 8 units of housing, you're adding 8 units of housing. You're not adding new building construction, but you are adding residents of 8 units. We're fooling ourselves if we think it means that it doesn't increase the population of the town.
It does, but it's an adaptive
Right.
reuse.
I think one of the things that we heard, yeah, to that point, there was a lot of feedback where people said, we support affordable housing, we're very anxious about new building, we're very anxious about taking something away that might be open space. So I think, you know, even people who maybe initially seemed somewhat resistant, they said, we really like the idea. So at least what I heard from a lot of people was, we love the idea of adaptive reuse over,
Absolutely.
you know, new construction, and certainly when that new construction is cutting down trees and taking away open space, which is something we've long heard is a very strongly held value in town.
I mean, maybe some of the offices that are on second floors could be converted.
Right, second and third floors. We
That's
talked
what
to
they were.
landlords about it.
You know, I've heard that many times, do we know that's true? I mean, are the second floors empty on Main Street?
I'm not saying they're
Couple
empty
of
now.
areas.
This video
But,
just went out.
Years ago,
Just
they were
went
all.
out.
Is that?
This feed just went
Right,
out.
my office, look at my office was once, we're still in an apartment when I,
Oh, the
it was my
feed,
office.
This feed just went out, so a
Blaze?
few people on the committee who were watching texted me.
And what?
My watch just went bzz, bzz, bzz.
Oh, did it go out at 11?
Yeah,
The feed.
Lori,
Oh,
a
yeah,
few
what time
people.
is it?
Oh, the
It's
feed
after
just
5
went
after
out.
11.
Oh, yeah.
We knew it was
We're
gonna
scheduled
go.
to 11.
Okay, that's what happened.
Yeah.
We got something out of this.
Well,
We do have
Well-
committee members on.
We'll give you, I'll certainly put into writing my thoughts
Yeah, if you-
or
if you-
more.
Yeah, I have my rough notes, but I can, you
Yeah.
know, document this and
because
send it
then, you know,
through.
our plan, we're gonna meet Monday to start redrafting. And what we come back with doesn't necessarily have to be the final thing. It is gonna have goals in it though. And it is going to be.
No, you should have goals, yeah.
Yeah, otherwise it's not a plan. And then it'll say something like, you know, we recommend working with the Ridgefield Housing Authority to evaluate their properties for additional development.
That
Without,
seems fair to me.
Yeah, without specifying
the vocabulary word of the night, yes.
specificity.
All right. Because I reached out and I was told that I could not meet with the board members individually about this. But if you would like to send us your written comments on the plan, you know, just go through it with your keyboard open and just type your thoughts and notes. We will take every word into account and read back at the plan.
But you heard what we said tonight, right? I mean, as far as my comments goes, I think that I really relayed a lot of what I thought about the plan to you, so if you didn't get that, I'll certainly write it down again, but I think I said what I feel. Okay, I like the West Cogs.
That's good.
I did like that flavor of the toolkit. I don't like the specificity. I was concerned about all the big numbers that Sean has reiterated.
We'll take those out.
You know, I think that they're, I like having a plan. I think a plan is good. You know, you have a plan. But a plan gets me concerned also in that once it's written down, somebody's gonna, and I know that if up at the state, it's gonna sit on a shelf and nobody will look at it. In Ridgefield, someone will pull it down and say, it's in the plan, so we're gonna do it, or it's in the plan, so we agreed to do it, or it's in the plan, so this was a good idea. And it's not, that is a jump from where we are. So I wanna be very careful about what is in this plan. I really do.
But I think that point is, we can't be afraid if someone's not reading the language correctly. So I agree, if we say we're doing this, but I don't think it says we're doing this. I think everything, the language is, we're pursuing, we're investigating, and
We come very close to being, I mean, right now, I think in the plan, you are very close to having specific areas that are being looked at and targeted for, and it's in the plan. And if, once it's in the
It
plan,
has to be revised.
that is a concern of mine. I don't wanna see that.
Yeah, I mean, that.
Right, but unless-
There's also language.
Unless there is some direction in the plan, it's just a bunch of vague thoughts and recommendations that will get you nowhere because it doesn't really give you a map. So it's going to have to be a map for what we do, it just be a less specific.
I would agree that, like for the TOD, that the plan would include the TOD in Branchville to include, or to consider and include some affordability.
Right.
How many to be determined? We don't know how many we're gonna be able to get down there.
Right, and when the Planning and Zoning Commission looks at the zoning there, they can figure out how to work the formula,
Right.
so that there are some affordable units. But that's certainly.
But I
down the
don't
road.
think that to me is a perfect opportunity to create the middle income housing, some affordability, some luxury units if you want.
Sure.
In a TOD, a true mixed housing development that has housing for everyone, because it's a transportation corridor. And we have public transportation there.
So our
And I
plan
think
is,
that's an important thing to keep in the plan, that
Yes.
transportation, public transportation be
yeah.
available.
we'll talk a little bit more about transportation. I think you mentioned that, somebody else mentioned that
Transportation's
too.
a big part.
Yeah, we'll talk a little bit more about transportation. So in terms of timing, we plan to meet on Monday. We have a special meeting set for Monday. Today is Wednesday. Can we look for your comments no later than the weekend?
yes, I can trust that.
Yeah.
Much appreciated.
Yeah.
Can I just make one very quick comment? Just, my daughter lives in affordable housing in Darien, and it's 16 units, brand new construction. She moved in November, it was built, the ribbon cutting was November 1st. I don't know every resident of the house, but it's a, 16 unit complex. I know of nobody that's from Darien. There's Norwalk, there's obviously Ridgefield. My daughter had been waiting in Ridgefield, not as long as other people have, but I just think that, we have a communal problem, and it's, when I think about if Darien had said, oh, we're really gonna prioritize Darien residents and their family, and, I think there's a need in the area, and that we're part of the solution too. That it's not just about Ridgefield. And, again, I don't think anyone in that house actually is from Darien, as far as I know,
There now.
that lives there now. I don't think anyone has family members, it's, Norwalk, it's a lot, Stamford, it's a lot of towns. I think there's even a couple people in New York.
Well, and that's wonderful.
And everyone income qualifies, obviously, yeah.
But our first priority is to provide for the people in Ridgefield.
Of course, but legally, obviously, you can't do that, and.
Not if you accept
Right.
federal funds.
Right.
Well, you can offer, you can
You
offer
offer
some,
preference,
some
right.
level of preference
Or
at
for
that
us.
point.
Christine?
Hi, I just wanted to ask a question. At the beginning, I appreciate, Maureen, I don't know your last name, I'm sorry. I really appreciate you, I apologize.
Oh, no, that's fine.
Okay, I really appreciate,
Kozlar.
okay. I appreciate you, bringing up the public's input and hearing us. I appreciate that. And as well, Bob Hebert, thank you so much for, you know, your honesty about this entire process. And at the beginning, you were asked a really good question by Mr. Connolly about what did you do with all the public input that you got? And it was kind of dismissed. So I'm just wondering, he said, can you kind of summarize for us what you got a lot of public input from the public hearings here, and what did you do with it? And what is your plan for it? What are your feelings about it? But there was no answer to that. So I'm curious about that too, as a member of the public, what you plan on doing with all of the public, you know, comments that you're hearing.
We haven't met yet. The
I
hearing
know,
just happened. We're meeting
I
Monday,
understand.
and I have pages of notes
Okay,
on I've been to every single hearing.
great.
The hearing and the 2 public
I'm glad
meetings.
to hear that.
We
I'm
have
surprised
notes
to
on
hear.
Taken into
everything.
consideration.
So
Thank
everything
you,
is
and
being
I'm-
considered, we just
Thank you,
haven't done it yet.
I wanted to finish
Okay.
my thought. You know, I'm surprised to hear that you haven't met, considering everything that's going on. The number of, you know, the public hearings, I'm surprised to hear you guys haven't sat down and said, all right, this is what the public said, this is what we should do. But that being said, I'd like to know.
Well, the Board of Selectmen has to weigh in as
Okay,
well.
my question then, because, you know, there's a lot of public comment and, you know, concern about this. So I'm hoping that when you make these corrections, or when you make these changes, especially, you know, the P and Z, like, said you need to prioritize using existing structures. Prioritize. They said that numerous times in their recommendations. So I can't I can't imagine that you would ignore that.
Of course not.
Of course not.
Wonderful, and I hope that we get a chance to see the updated draft, and that it won't just be pushed through. It seems
Public
like,
document, yeah.
and that maybe we could have another meeting, and that the public could have input, because you seem to be pushing this through, like, you know, well, we want to vote, we want this, I
Well, you
mean.
remember, the state set the
Well,
deadline, not us.
you asked for an extension to July
Yeah.
8th, and quite frankly, this committee just established a town email a month ago.
Mm-hmm.
So we have not been able to communicate on a town email at all. So they've been doing all this work, and you just established a town email, so maybe we can ask for, you know, another extension.
Well, if necessary, but let's take one step at a time right now. I'm not gonna say we're going to currently ask for another extension. We're trying, as I said, to OPM, we gave the reasons why, and I stated July 8th, and they
Okay.
explained to me that there's no true deadline or penalty.
Oh,
We
okay.
just wanna be sure you have a plan and you get the plan done.
Oh, so then that's great to know, so that we, you know, the
Right,
public
but
can feel
I
assured,
want you to know
especially
that
that these specifics
If
should
I may
absolutely
speak,
not be there.
If I may, July 8th is the current deadline.
Okay, so if you wanted it, you would have to
If we
let them
had-
know.
If we had to. I'm not gonna just say, okay, we're just gonna automatically
I didn't
extend
mean
it.
that, I
Yeah,
meant, you know, rather than push it
And by the
through
way,
and,
here, there's a review of everyone's comment from the public hearing that I'll be giving to Mr.
oh no, I'm
Goldenberg.
glad, I was hoping that, you know, I'm anxious to see
You have
the
it too?
Well, I have
changes,
my
because
Okay.
there should be, they should be substantial.
Wasn't mine.
So I'm anxious to see
I'm sorry,
them.
what's substantial?
Oh, yeah.
The changes, I'm
I have
anxious to
it.
see the changes, they should be substantial.
We've had a lot of feedback from a lot of different people.
Wonderful, I'm looking forward to it.
We can postpone minutes if you want.
That won't take that long.
Okay, so
Thank
thank
you.
you.
Okay.
Lastly, if you could please, I want to say thank you. I know it's been difficult, not easy. You're volunteers, we appreciate the work you're doing. It's important for our community. Thank you.
Thanks.
I second that.
Because I think it's a really good, it's a very comprehensive, I think it's a good one.
Okay, I will.
It's similar.
Yes, thank you.